Hi, my name is Jill Wilson from the Equality Practice. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing a woman to you who utterly understands equality and inclusion from both a legal perspective and from a personal perspective. Having met for the first time only recently, it was very clear from our conversations that we were kindred spirits and passionate about equality, so much so that I knew I wanted to work with Ella. This week, we have embarked upon a new and exciting project that will help raise awareness of transgender issues. Ella Stockdale of Troubleshooting Business Solutions, welcome to Including Me.
Thank you, Jill. Pleasure to be here.
Ella, can I ask you to tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the Including Me podcast Zoomcast and what makes you so passionate about equality and inclusion?
Yes, thank you. I'd love to. Like many people, I've had a really interesting and really varied journey. And you might think that, being a white woman, that inclusion or equality might not necessarily have the same impact as some of the groups that we're talking to and working with. But of course, it's when I open my mouth and speak that people know that I'm different. And like many people are, we all have differences. Not all of them are external. We don't always know what makes somebody different just by what we can see on the outside. Not even my accent will give you reliable information. But because of my accent, I've been called a foreigner. I've been questioned as to my right to be in this country, when in fact I was actually born here in the UK and I'm a UK citizen. But I really shouldn't have to even engage in that kind of conversation. Yes, there are times that somebody does have a legal duty to check, such as employment checks, absolutely. But outside of that, assuming that we understand somebody's journey just because we hear an accent or we know that somebody is from a different culture actually closes down the conversation. So people instantly heard my accent and assumed that I am not British, even though I am. But obviously I've spent a considerable amount of time in America. But the whys, the hows of my journey from this country to that country and back again, they're not really things that I want to discuss in the paint aisle of B&Q while I'm choosing the right shade for my living room. And yes, that has happened to me. When we make assumptions about people's differences or we single them out because of their differences, then what we're doing is shutting a door to, really discovering who that person is.
Sorry, Ella, to interrupt. Many people think that a white woman cannot suffer from these sort of prejudices. But we've had a few conversations and you actually have, haven't you?
Absolutely. I was really surprised when I first moved here as to some of the comments that I heard. My first experience in business in this country, I was actually called American trailer trash to my face, which is very offensive. We might think because as a British culture, we're very comfortable and familiar with American culture. That's sort of funny and that's okay. But, really, you don't understand the cultural significance of calling somebody trailer trash, what that really is. I was also told to tone down my Americanisms. Now, when I first moved to this country, my Americanisms were much, much stronger. Obviously, they are toned down now quite naturally. But pointing it out at first made me feel that my Americanisms were blocking my effective communication. And that's a concern in business. We all want to be able to communicate effectively. And one time when I was stood out in the rain and I made a comment about, the rain and, the weather. And somebody just turned around and said, well, you know what we say to people who don't like the weather here, they can go home. And the thing is that this is my home. Again, I've had a different journey, and that's my business, but that doesn't mean to say I'm in the wrong place. And immediately assuming that somebody is in the wrong place just because they've had a different journey is very problematic.
You know, you would never dream of talking to somebody that was from the African population or the Asian population in that way, because they are, well, you just wouldn't, because you know it's wrong. And also they have legal protections about the way people speak to them. Does that not apply, those legal protections then? Do they not apply to you as well, you are a British citizen with an American accent. You're also a woman, and you was a woman in a man's world, wasn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, there are protections against discrimination. Absolutely. And businesses have a duty to protect people against bullying and harassment, even if it's because of a perceived difference, whether or not that difference is legitimate or not. It is a perceived difference, and religion is a person's religion is a protected characteristic. There is a lot of differences that people have that are not necessarily noticeable. So, for example, my religious belief is that I'm a pagan. Sorry, a pagan. Now, that's not a religion that a lot of people know a lot about or understand. And it's not something that I am particularly vocal about, typically, especially not in the business world. But people do ask me, do I make sacrifices and have orgies under the full moon? Now,
would we bit cold?
Exactly. And would we make I wouldn't even be able to make a similar comment about another religion, because I just simply wouldn't be that offensive. And that's the point. Just because something is not readily understood by our culture doesn't mean to say that we can automatically put it into a mocking sort of situation. Now, the people who say that to me, I'm going to assume don't intend me any harm. But if I was in a workplace situation and somebody was bullying me, now that's a situation that somebody would latch onto. And that's the kind of joke that goes around. And these are the kind of complaints that I hear from people all the time. People calling out people for being witches, getting people, really wound up about some of these very misunderstood differences. I know that I've not suffered the terrible and sad treatment that some people have. However, coming from a very different place, or having a different belief system, or just having a different journey that is invisible to other people, has shown me just how pervasive and embedded that pointing out differences tends to be in our culture.
Is that what drives you forward, Ella? Is that where because I can feel your passion even today, injustice in just because somebody looks different or sounds different or behaves different, it's not a good enough reason to treat somebody poorly, is it?
Absolutely not. I have always had a drive for fairness. Fairness seems to be a really key value in my life, and has been throughout. And maybe that's because I have always been somewhat of a square peg in a round hole. I mean, I've not even addressed what it was like being a British child in an American high school. I understand how people can be different and what that feels like, moving into very difficult situations. So fairness has been a principle of mine throughout my life. And I've had these life experiences that have illustrated why it's very, very important. I've gravitated toward employment and working with businesses with regards to employment, because the basis of employment law is fairness, treating people fairly. And if a business follows those principles, then actually the details are just they're just an administrative function. If you've got fairness right, everything else can be built from that. So I just sort of lay my foundation as that. And I've got loads and loads of experiences that have shown me how critical it is when it comes to how we treat people to use fairness as a basis.
And what a thing to be proud of as a country, that we base the way we interact and our laws on fairness. I do think we've got a way to go, but we're going in the right direction, and that's something to be celebrated.
It really, really is, I have to say. The employment law system is one that I'm really proud of in this country. It's not perfect, absolutely, it is not perfect. And like you said, it does have a long way to go. But again, just having a system that is based on treating people fairly is a really good starting point.
Ella, I know you and I could speak for another 10 hours, let alone 10 minutes. So I will ask you back in the future if you would come back, and we'll talk about something else. But for now, Ella Stockdale, thank you for joining me on Including Me.
Thank you for having me, Jill.
Thank you.